G'day, mates. Grab a cold one and settle in, because I've got a wild tale to share that'll make you question the very fabric of suburban life here in the land down under. It all started when Karen, our newly elected HOA president, decided my Wi-Fi password was communal property. Buckle up, because this is a long one. I've always been a bit of a hermit, preferring the comfort of my small, but cozy apartment in a quiet suburb of Sydney to the hustle and bustle of the city. Name's Alex, and I work as a freelance software developer, which means I spend most of my days at home, tapping away at my keyboard, lost in lines of code. My apartment complex, Eucalyptus Grove, has always been a peaceful haven, that is, until Karen moved in. Eucalyptus Grove is a quaint little community, with its well-manicured lawns and friendly residents. We are the kind of place where people still bring over Tim Tams when new neighbours move in, and where the annual Australia Day Barbie is the highlight of the social calendar. It's not fancy, but it's home. I'd been living here for about 3 years when Karen arrived. At first, she seemed nice enough, a middle-aged woman with a bob haircut and a penchant for pastel cardigans. She moved into the apartment directly across from mine, and I remember helping her carry in some boxes on moving day. Little did I know that this act of kindness would be the beginning of a saga that would test the limits of my patience and the strength of our community. It started innocently enough. Karen began attending HOA meetings, always with a suggestion or two on how to improve the community. At first, her ideas were met with skepticism, but she persisted, charming some of the board members with her enthusiasm and perceived dedication to the community. Before long, Karen had managed to win over enough support to be elected as the new HOA president. As president, she vowed to bring about change and make Eucalyptus Grove a better place for everyone. But beneath her charming facade, Karen had a hidden agenda, one that would soon disrupt the very fabric of our community. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon when I first noticed something was off. My internet was sluggish, and I couldn't figure out why. Being a tech-savvy bloke, I decided to check my router settings. To my shock, I found several unknown devices connected to my network. At first, I thought it might be a glitch. But as I dug deeper, I realized the truth: someone was stealing my Wi-Fi. And not just anyone. The device names gave it away: Karen's iPhone, Karen's iPad, and Karen's laptop. I was gobsmacked. How had she gotten my password? Then I remembered I'd helped her set up her devices when she first moved in, using my Wi-Fi as a temporary solution. But that was months ago, and I'd assumed she'd sorted out her own internet by now. Feeling a mix of anger and disbelief, I immediately changed my Wi-Fi password. Little did I know, this simple act of protecting my own property would spark a war that would engulf our entire community. The next morning, I was awakened by a loud banging on my door. I stumbled out of bed, threw on a dressing gown, and opened the door to find Karen standing there, her face red with anger. "What's the big idea, Alex?" she demanded, pushing past me into my apartment. "Why can't I connect to the Wi-Fi anymore?" I blinked, still groggy from sleep. "Karen, that's my personal Wi-Fi. You shouldn't be using it without permission." She scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. We're neighbors. Neighbors share things. Not Wi-Fi, Karen. That's my personal internet that I pay for. You need to get your own." Karen's eyes narrowed. As HOA president, I think it's in the community's best interest if we all share resources. Now, give me the new password. I stood my ground. "No, Karen. That's not how this works. Please leave." As I ushered her out, she turned and hissed, "This isn't over, Alex. You'll regret this." I had no idea how right she would be. Over the next few weeks, life at Eucalyptus Grove became increasingly uncomfortable. Karen seemed to be everywhere, watching me with narrowed eyes. Other neighbors started giving me odd looks, and I overheard whispers about me being uncooperative and selfish. Then the notices started arriving. First, it was a warning about my potted plants being unsightly. Then a fine for excessive noise, despite the fact that I rarely make any noise at all. Each time, the notices were signed by Karen in her capacity as HOA president. I tried to reason with her, but she was unmoved. "If you'd just share your Wi-Fi like a good neighbor, all of this could go away," she said with a sickly sweet smile. But I stood firm. My Wi-Fi was my property, and I wasn't about to let Karen bully me into sharing it. Chapter 6, the legal battle begins. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more bizarre, I received a summons. Karen, on behalf of the HOA, was taking me to court to force me to share my Wi-Fi password. I was stunned. Surely this couldn't be legal. I consulted with a lawyer, who assured me that Karen didn't have a leg to stand on. "Your Wi-Fi is your private property," he said. "The HOA has no right to demand access to it." Armed with this knowledge, I went to court feeling confident. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Justice Simmons, listened to both sides of the argument. Karen tried to argue that Wi-Fi was a community resource, and that by not sharing, I was violating the spirit of the HOA agreement. Justice Simmons wasn't buying it. "Mrs. Karen," she said sternly, "HOA agreements do not supersede personal property rights. Mr. Alex is under no obligation to share his private internet connection." I left the courthouse feeling vindicated, but Karen's parting words sent a chill down my spine. "This isn't over, Alex. Not by a long shot." I should have known Karen wouldn't take defeat lying down. The very next day, I woke up to find my car was missing. At first, I thought it had been stolen, but a quick call to the local police revealed the truth: it had been towed at the request of the HOA for unauthorized parking. When I confronted Karen, she just smiled sweetly. "Oh dear, didn't you see the new parking regulations? They were posted last night. Your spot is now reserved for visitors." I was furious. "You can't just change the rules overnight." "Actually, I can," she replied, tapping her HOA president badge. "Maybe if you were more cooperative, these little misunderstandings wouldn't happen." I knew then that this was war. Over the next few weeks, Karen's campaign against me intensified. She called emergency HOA meetings, painting me as a troublemaker who refused to cooperate with community initiatives. To my horror, many of my neighbors began to side with her. "Just give her the password, mate," my neighbor Dave said one day. "It's not worth all this hassle." But I couldn't back down. It wasn't about the Wi-Fi anymore, it was about standing up to a bully who was abusing her power. The final straw came when I received a notice that the HOA was putting a lien on my home for unpaid fines and violations. The amount they were claiming was astronomical. There was no way I could pay it. I knew I had to take action. With no other option, I found myself back in court, this time suing the HOA for harassment and abuse of power. I had a solid case documentation of all of Karen's actions, witness statements from the few neighbors who were still on my side, and clear evidence that the HOA regulations had been manipulated to target me specifically. As the trial began, I felt confident. Justice Simmons was presiding again, and she had already ruled in my favor once. Surely she would see through Karen's lies and put an end to this madness. But as Karen took the stand, something strange happened. She began to speak in a soft, vulnerable voice, her eyes wide and innocent. She talked about how she was just trying to build a sense of community, and how my stubbornness had forced her to take drastic actions. To my disbelief, I saw Justice Simmons' expression soften. Karen batted her eyelashes, letting a single tear roll down her cheek as she described how hurt she was by my selfishness. I watched in horror as Justice Simmons, who had been so firm and no-nonsense before, melted under Karen's performance. When Karen stepped down from the stand, she accidentally dropped her handkerchief, and Justice Simmons rushed to pick it up for her. My heart sank. I knew then that I was doomed. As Justice Simmons delivered her verdict, I could hardly believe my ears. She ruled in favor of the HOA, stating that I had violated the spirit of community living, and that my refusal to share my Wi-Fi password was selfish and unnecessary. I was ordered to pay all the fines, remove the lien on my home by giving Karen my Wi-Fi password, and issue a public apology to the HOA. As the gavel came down, I saw Karen smirk triumphantly. I left the courthouse in a daze, my mind reeling. How could this have happened? How could a judge be so easily swayed by a bit of flirting and some crocodile tears? The next few weeks were a blur. I complied with the court order, giving Karen my Wi-Fi password and watching helplessly as she shared it with the entire complex. My internet slowed to a crawl as everyone and their dog logged on. Karen paraded around the complex like a conquering hero, basking in her victory. She even had the audacity to suggest that we name the Wi-Fi network Karen's Community Connection. I felt defeated, my sense of privacy and autonomy shattered. But as I sat in my apartment, watching my painfully slow internet struggle to load a simple web page, I knew this couldn't be the end. There had to be a way to fight back, to expose Karen's manipulation and the judge's bias. And then, like a bolt from the blue, an idea struck me. If Karen wanted to share my internet so badly, why not give her exactly what she wanted and then some? Being a software developer has its perks. Over the next few days, I worked tirelessly, setting up a complex system of virtual networks and traffic routing. To the outside world, everything looked normal. But I knew better. I created a separate network that looked like my regular Wi-Fi, but was actually a carefully controlled environment. When Karen or any of her cronies logged on, they'd find their internet speeds throttled to a crawl. Websites would take ages to load, videos would buffer endlessly, and downloads would time out. But that was just the beginning. I set up a series of fake websites, copies of popular sites that were subtly wrong. News articles with outrageous, fake headlines. Social media posts that didn't actually exist. Slowly, I began to gaslight Karen and her supporters, making them question their own sanity. To add insult to injury, I programmed the network to occasionally display a message, bandwidth limit exceeded. Please contact Karen for upgrade options. Let her deal with the complaints for a change. Hashtag Chapter 13, Karen's downfall. It didn't take long for the complaints to start rolling in. Neighbors were furious about the slow internet, the weird glitches, the bizarre things they were seeing online. And who did they blame? Karen, of course, the self-proclaimed Wi-Fi queen. Karen was bewildered. She couldn't understand why the internet was behaving so strangely. She called in technicians, but they couldn't find anything wrong with the physical infrastructure. As far as they could tell, everything was working perfectly. The final straw came during the next HOA meeting. Karen had prepared a PowerPoint presentation to showcase her achievements as president. But when she tried to present it, the slides were all wrong. Instead of her carefully prepared notes, the slides showed embarrassing photos of Karen and quotes of all the nasty things she'd said about other residents. The room erupted in chaos. Residents were shouting, demanding explanations. Karen tried to maintain control, but it was useless. Her carefully constructed image of the perfect HOA president was crumbling before her eyes. In the aftermath of the disastrous HOA meeting, a group of residents banded together to call for Karen's resignation. They also started a petition to have the Wi-Fi sharing rule overturned, arguing that it had caused nothing but problems. Karen fought back, of course. She tried to blame me for sabotaging the network, but without any evidence, her accusations fell flat. More and more residents came forward with stories of how Karen had bullied and manipulated them. The final nail in the coffin came when one of Karen's former allies on the HOA board leaked emails showing how Karen had planned to use the shared Wi-Fi to monitor residents' internet activity. The privacy implications were staggering, and the backlash was immediate. Faced with a full-scale revolt, Karen had no choice but to resign. The new HOA board's first act was to rescind the Wi-Fi sharing rule and issue a formal apology to me. As for Justice Simmons, an ethics investigation was launched after evidence emerged of her inappropriate behavior during the trial. She was eventually removed from the bench, her reputation in tatters. It's been a year since the Great Wi-Fi War of Eucalyptus Grove. Karen moved out shortly after her resignation, and we haven't heard from her since. Rumor has it she's trying to start a neighborhood watch program in her new community. Heaven help them. As for me, I've become something of a local hero. Neighbors often come to me for tech advice, and I'm always happy to help as long as they don't ask for my Wi-Fi password. We've all learned some valuable lessons from this experience. The importance of standing up to bullies, even when they hide behind positions of authority. The power of community, when it stands united against injustice. And, perhaps most importantly, the sacred nature of a good Wi-Fi connection. These days, Eucalyptus Grove is a much more harmonious place. We still have our disagreements, of course no community is perfect. But we handle them with open communication and mutual respect, not underhanded tactics and court battles. As I sit here, enjoying my blissfully private and fast internet connection, I can't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Who would have thought that a simple Wi-Fi password could cause so much drama? But in the end, it wasn't really about the Wi-Fi. It was about standing up for what's right, even when it seems like the whole world is against you. It was about using your skills and knowledge to fight back against injustice. And it was about the power of community to overcome even the most entitled of Karens. So, to all you Aussies out there facing your own Karens, remember, stay strong, stay clever, and never, ever give up your Wi-Fi password. You never know when it might just save your sanity and your community.